Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. I'm just gonna jump straight into the story. So me and a childhood friend of mine, I'll call him Ethan, were out in the forests of Maine on a short camping trip. We both were fairly experienced. However, this was Ethan's first time going to this spot. I'd been there plenty of times before though, so I knew the area pretty well. We backpacked down a several-hour-long trail to get to a clearing in the trees that we set up camping. I think we arrived around 6 o'clock. So, after setting everything up, we built up a nice campfire and made food, then cracked open a few beers and talked around the fire as the sun set around us. It was a chill, enjoyable night. I want to say around 2 hours into the night, though, we both heard what we thought was something moving around just outside of our campsite, like in the darkness, past what our campfire was lighting up. We looked and saw nothing, and for the rest of the night, we heard nothing else. We thought it was probably just a small animal scurrying away. Honestly, if nothing else happened, I never would have remembered it or thought about it again. That's how insignificant it seemed in the moment. If you're unfamiliar with camping, it might seem strange, but being out here all the time, those kinds of noises happen a lot and are almost always nothing to worry about. Once we had our couple drinks and started getting tired, we called it a night and poured out the fire, then got in our tents and fell asleep. In the morning, we woke up early, as this spot was good for a reason. That reason is because there was a very secluded private pond just a half-mile through the woods from the campsite. Nobody knew about it because the trail didn't actually lead to it. It was really nice, though, having a mini waterfall and small river running through it. We spent most of our morning there, like a whole 3 or 4 hours. Eventually, we headed back to make food and rest for a bit. I even took a short nap. Again, though, around 6 o'clock, the sun was getting lower, and we hadn't collected any firewood yet for the campfire. Most of the dry sticks lying around the camp we used up last night. So, I had to do a little more searching to collect what we needed. Midway through, Ethan said he was going to take a walk around and just explore the other areas, but would pick up whatever he could on his way back. I said, sure, and just continued grabbing sticks off the ground. Ethan did this pretty much every time we were out camping. I think he just enjoyed having some time to spend alone and to just take in the nature. Anyway, I got a good amount of firewood and sat back down at the camp, just wasting time until Ethan got back so I could start the fire. The sun got lower and lower, and eventually I just kind of realized it had been a strangely long time since he'd left. Usually he wasn't out this long, and he was experienced enough to know to not be wandering the woods so close to sunsets. The only way we had to keep in contact out here, where there's no service, is through our small satellite messengers. We kept them on us at all times in our small waste packs, along with bear spray and other stuff like that. It's usually more of an SOS device, but in situations like this, it came in handy too. I pulled mine out to send him a message, but saw that he'd already sent me one just a few minutes ago. Ethan said he got kind of lost, but happened to stumble back to the pond. I sent a message saying to just stay there, and I'll hurry over to lead him back. Me knowing the area, I quickly started heading to the pond. At this point, it was really just a race against the sun. Even having headlamps and knowing the area during the day, it would still be really easy to get lost at night. I got about halfway to the pond, maybe 4 or 5 minutes away, when I got another message. I reached into my bag and checked it, assuming it was just going to be him checking in or asking for an ETA, but Ethan sent the words, "I see you." What did he mean? I see you. I wasn't even near the pond yet. I stopped and looked around, confused and not seeing him anywhere. I said I wasn't there yet and didn't see him. Slightly worried, I started moving faster, basically running to the pond. I got there quickly, running up to the tree line before the water. Ethan wasn't there. From where I was, I could see the whole tree line around the pond, and he wasn't anywhere around. I felt blood rush from my face and pulled the messenger back out. My last message saying that I didn't see him hadn't been opened. I called out his name, hearing my voice echo through the trees. The sun was nearly gone, and the forest was getting quieter and darker. Maybe he already started heading back, like he somehow remembered the way. I don't know why he would, but where else would he be? With the daylight practically gone, I knew it was safest for me to head back and figure things out from the camp. I didn't start the fire yet, so if I waited too long, I'd never be able to find the campsite in the dark. I started walking, feeling uneasy as I moved through the trees and felt the woods get darker and darker. All I could think about was the ominous last message he sent. I see you. It was nearly pitch black by the time I was a minute or so from the clearing. But then I saw something. A flickering orange glow right from where the campsite was. As I got closer, I could see that the campfire was lit, and someone was standing right by it. I started approaching, feeling a wave of relief, knowing Ethan had made it back safely. But when I got closer, the person suddenly shifted and ran away from the fire and out of the campsite. Heart pumping, I ran up, confused and terrified. That wasn't Ethan. I pulled my messenger back out and started spamming texts. At this point, I was seriously worried and disturbed by what was going on. But just a minute or later, Ethan came running out of the woods and into the campsite. He had a face of both fear and relief. He immediately said we had to go. I agreed, mentioning the guy I saw by the fire, and him saying it was likely the same guy he saw approaching him by the pond. He said he thought it was me until he got closer and realized it was someone else. Apparently, then Ethan tried asking if the guy knew how to get back to the trail, but the man didn't respond. He just kept walking forward, revealing a really unsettling smile across his face. And according to Ethan, something just wasn't normal about it. He said he couldn't help but feel extremely creeped out by the guy and his smile and ran away. We packed and left. The hike back was unnerving, to say the least, but we did manage to get to our car and leave. This event made me rethink back on the whole camping trip, remembering the movement we heard outside of our camp on the first night and just putting all the pieces together. Likely, the man that was out there was watching us the whole time, waiting for one of us to be alone. Even just thinking about his presence outside of our campsite, as we were talking, sleeping, and everything, completely unknown to us, is extremely disturbing. We still talk about that camping trip every now and again, but never plan to go back to those woods. Thanks for listening to my story. If you liked it, please leave a like and subscribe. I greatly appreciate when you do, and I hope you have a great day. So we're going to read a scary story from another channel. These stories are terrifying. You should definitely check them out. Let's get into the story. The first story is called Creepy Cabin Getaway by Darnell Ricks. I was taking a short getaway alone to an Airbnb. It was about 6 hours away from where I lived. I didn't choose it for any reason in particular. I just opened the map on Airbnb and looked for something cheap and somewhat isolated in a smaller town, just so I could get out of the city and enjoy some quiet for a few days. I didn't actually care about how nice the town was, because I planned to be in the Airbnb pretty much the whole time. The house I booked was alone in a small forest inside of this really small town, and it was the only house listed on Airbnb for that whole area. The good price reeled me in, though. I made the drive, mostly through empty wooded roads, until I got to the house. I guess it was more of a cabin, though, if I'm being honest. It was older and surrounded by trees, with no other houses or buildings in sight. I opened the creaky front door and brought everything in. The only thing I needed to do before settling in for the next few days was go to the grocery store and stock up on some food and drinks. I drove into town. It was mid-afternoon, but there were almost no other cars or people out. Maybe it was just because I was from the city, but even for a small town like this, It felt like I was driving through a ghost town. And when I walked through the grocery store, it was just as empty. The few people I did pass by, though, gave me a strange, cold look, following me with their eyes as I passed by them. It almost felt like they all somehow knew that I wasn't from here, and they didn't like it. It was really weird. I got what I needed and headed back to the cabin. By then, I think I'd mostly decided that I was just being paranoid over nothing. There's no way those people actually cared who I was. I was just some random person in a grocery store. I shook it off and felt better knowing I wasn't going into town for the rest of the trip anyway. I unpacked and watched TV in the living room. That whole night and the next day was nice and quiet. That following night, though, it was pouring outside. A storm had rolled in and didn't seem like it was going to stop or slow down anytime soon. I was cozied up inside, of course, laying on the couch, half asleep, when there was a knock at the door to the cabin. I shot up and looked at the door. There's no way someone was outside the house in the middle of this storm. I checked my phone and saw no texts or anything from the Airbnb host. It was also just that one knock at the door. After maybe 30 seconds, I got up and walked over. When I looked out, I didn't see anyone, although it was really dark, and there was no porch light, so without opening the door, I couldn't make out all that much. As the minutes passed, my mind stumbled to every possibility that wasn't someone knocking at the door, like maybe the storm blowing something over, or even me dreaming it while being half asleep. I think I really just didn't want to believe that someone was outside because I knew how unsettling that would be. I laid back down on the couch and had the TV on, sort of paying half attention and just laying there. A decent amount of time went by. I wasn't keeping track, but if I had to guess, I'd say about an hour. The TV was fairly quiet, but the storm was still going on. Between those sounds, though, there was a sudden cough behind me, like a man quickly coughing and trying to cover the sound. I jolted my head back and looked immediately, seeing something move away from the outside of the window. I'd only caught a split second of it, not enough to even make out if it was a reflection or a figure, but obviously hearing the cough gave it away. Someone was outside the Airbnb. I knew they had to have been watching into the cabin through that window, which instantly sent chills through me. I grabbed my phone and dialed 911, telling them I think I was being stalked and that someone was creeping around outside. The storm was too loud for me to hear any footsteps, so I had no idea if they ran away or were still around out there. I was relieved when a police officer showed up only 3 minutes later. I opened the door and started explaining what was going on, but the officer was visibly unbothered by anything. When I finished explaining, he responded with, "That's it," as if it was no big deal. The officer didn't take down any notes or anything. He had that same cold look as everyone else in the town. He almost seemed mad at me, like he was genuinely upset for making him come out into the storm to help me. He said he didn't see anyone when he pulled in, so if something actually happens, then to call. Before I could say anything else, he turned his back on me and drove away. I honestly couldn't believe it. That made me feel even less safe and even more disturbed by whatever the hell was going on in this town. This whole town had me on edge, and knowing something wasn't right, I decided to call it early and just get out of there. I locked the door and started rushing to pack my things. I was only able to get my backpack opened and begin stuffing clothes into it. So like maybe 60 seconds went by after the cop left before heavy knocks slammed against the front door again, but this time they didn't stop. They kept banging on the door. I only checked out of the bedroom window, confirming the cop car was gone, so I knew this was whoever had been watching me. I hurried, packing everything I could in just 3 or 4 minutes. I thought about calling the cops again, but honestly, I felt like it would somehow only get me in trouble, or that the cop would somehow take the other guy aside, even if he did catch them. But then they suddenly stopped knocking. The storm felt like it got increasingly louder. I couldn't hear if they left or not, so I quietly walked up to the door and looked out. I saw nothing. No one was out there. I knew I needed to leave whenever I had the chance, so I had my backpack on and my car keys ready. I swung open the door and fled out of the cabin into the storm. My heart was racing, knowing the person was probably running around the house to get to me. I got in my car, turned it on, and pulled out of the driveway. With the heavy downpour, I couldn't even see more than 10 feet ahead, so I don't know if they had chased me or not. They could have even been right behind me, running up to the car as I pulled away, and I wouldn't have been able to see them. I drove down the forested driveway until I got to the road, then left town and drove all the way home without stopping. That was the most unsettling and creepy experience of my life. And I think it's worse because I didn't know why any of it was happening, or even who it was creeping around the cabin, watching me through the windows and banging on the door. I keep thinking about the weird feeling I got in that town, thinking maybe people knew that it was an Airbnb, and they hated outsiders for some reason. They went to extreme measures to get rid of me. It almost gave me the feeling that I was in the middle of a town that was all part of a private cult or something. If I decided to stay that night, things might have escalated past the point of no return. Luckily, I didn't have to find out, though. Was off about it. Something was off about the entire house. There were boxes piled up in the corner and random stuff left out in the open. It definitely needed some work, which was weird because Josh and his girlfriend had lived here for at least 5 years at this point. Usually, you can tell a lot about a person by their living situation, and it seemed like he'd let this place fall apart. I turned the TV on to distract myself from these thoughts as I drifted off to sleep. The next morning, I woke up around noon and made my way downstairs where Josh was sitting, barely asleep on the couch. I didn't really feel rested either, and I started to wonder if I should have stayed up with him the night before instead of going to bed early. As I approached him, though, his face lit up, and he had this really excited look on his face. Suddenly, he was full of energy. He asked how I slept and offered to make some breakfast. I sat down on the couch, and we chatted for a while, and he was back to his normal, energetic self. I brought up how weird he was acting the night before, and he laughed it off, assuring me that he was just exhausted and had been working way too hard lately. His girlfriend must have been out of town for longer than he'd initially told me, and I figured that he must have been alone in the house for a while. I decided to give him the benefit of the doubt. Maybe he had just been lonely. After eating, we started watching a movie, and I began to relax. For a while, everything was going well, and I was glad to have my old buddy back. But as the movie reached its climax, Josh started to nod off again. This caught me off guard, and I was really starting to worry about him. I asked him if he was feeling okay, and he responded with a tired, "Yeah, just a little under the weather." He took a sip from his water bottle and rubbed his eyes. I wasn't buying it. This was really weird, and I was growing increasingly concerned. I didn't think he'd be driving himself around, but at that point, I hadn't seen him drive at all. Plus, he'd be staying with me for another night, and I wasn't about to let him drive if he was sick. And although I didn't want to intrude on his privacy or accuse him of anything, I couldn't help but ask if he was taking care of himself. He replied with a sharp look and an angry, "What do you mean?" I felt like he was being defensive, and I shut my mouth. At that moment, he started talking again, quickly changing the subject and offering an explanation for his behavior. He claimed he'd been dealing with fatigue, memory loss, and a lack of motivation lately, and he'd been neglecting his appearance and hygiene because he thought it was pointless. That sounded correct. I didn't want to force him to talk about it anymore, so I nodded along. We watched the rest of the movie in silence, and neither of us spoke a word during the car ride back to my place. As he walked towards his front door, he suddenly turned around, faced me, and whispered, "I haven't been honest with you," before disappearing inside. I'll never forget the puzzled and concerned look I had on my face at that moment. I stood there on his doorstep for a good 10 seconds, unsure of what to do. I ended up going back to my own place. I couldn't stop thinking about his comment. Did he want to tell me something? Was everything okay? To this day, I'm still not sure what exactly he was trying to say. But one thing I am certain of is that something definitely isn't right with him. I'd known this guy for 3 years, so when he suddenly invited me over to his house, saying he needed help with something, I figured why not. But after I arrived, I got a feeling that something was off. The whole room was empty. There was not a single thing in there, aside from the small bed against the wall. And just as strange, it looked brand new, like it was bought specifically for me coming over. At first, I tried to brush it off, figuring that he must have just moved. Still, I really just wanted to make sure Josh was okay. So I sent a text to his girlfriend. Like I said, they'd been together for 5 years, and we all hung out together a few times during college, but I didn't really know her that well. I only waited a couple of minutes before she responded. All I'd said was that Josh was acting a little weird and seemed out of it. So I asked if she noticed anything recently as well, or if she might have known why he was like this right now. She said that they've been broken up and that she moved out 4 months ago and had no idea what I was talking about. What? I was actually in shock. Why did he lie about her just being gone for the weekend? And why'd he have me come over so suddenly now and not months ago? Things weren't adding up. It still didn't explain why he was acting so strange, and only made me feel like I couldn't trust him even more, making the whole thing more unsettling. Not wanting to sleep without getting answers, I turned back toward the door to leave the room, but froze in place. I could see a shadow standing right behind the door. After a second, he moved away. I felt my heart start racing a bit as I moved closer to the door and listened, then opened it, stepping into the hallway and closing the door behind me. I saw the door to his bedroom was open, and I could hear him moving around in there. All the lights in the house were off now, but right away, I noticed something on the back side of the door that wasn't there before. It was a mount, like one side screwed into the wall and the other into the door. He had to have just done this, probably hand-screwing it in, as I was in the room, trying to figure out what was going on. I didn't want to be inside that house with him for another second. I started quickly and quietly walking away. As I got into the living room, I couldn't help but notice that there was something on the kitchen counter. It was an open package for a deadbolt, one of those locks you put on a door that you can only access from one side. I felt my stomach drop, then heard footsteps rushing behind me. I turned around and saw Josh, that same tired and dead look on his face. I asked what the hell he was trying to do, but he didn't respond. I felt a tension, like he was about to do something. Before he could, I ran to the front door. He called out my name a couple times in that eerie, tired voice, but I kept going, getting in my car and leaving. I spent that whole drive thinking and decompressing on what just happened. By the time I got home, Josh had blocked me on everything, which made me more sure that what he was doing was something awful. Though at the time, I didn't do anything about it. I was stupid. And I guess I felt, since nothing yet had happened, I had nothing to show for it. And having been close to him for 3 years, it was hard for me to turn him in. I still just can't understand why he was trying to lock me inside that room, though, or even what his plan really was. It's crazy how I'd known him for 3 years, and yet it feels like maybe I never really knew him. I'm just glad I got out of it when I did.